I just wired up a cigarette lighter to my motorcycle and now I can utilize my GPS from my car, and it's pretty luxurious. Alright, so we got this cool CB500, this custom CB500 thing that we've created, and I'd like to add some auxiliary power to it. A 12-volt socket, little cigarette lighter kind of thing, your standard cigarette lighter that I can then plug a myriad of things into that. And I'd like to find a spot for, which is where this piece of scrap metal that I've got here, this stuff comes. So in order to kind of figure stuff out, get a better idea, I'm going to take this little ring off that screws on this socket, and this will give me an idea of how wide this here socket is and how big my hole needs to be that I need to make. And so this piece of scrap metal should work just fine. I could possibly make the whole thing out of this without any problem. Alright, so we got our piece here, and now I want to weld this guy onto the side and sort of bend this around and give it a little bit of extra strength right around in here. So here this guy is, we brazed up the edges there to weld that together, and now I'm going to go ahead, and we don't need this full length here, so I'm going to trim this back so it's like 1/4 of an inch or something like that. Alright, final assembly, so to speak. I still have to paint this afterwards. This gives us an idea. We'll test fit it. These little washers are basically spacers on the bottom because there's a little bit of a rise on the handlebar risers there, so this needs to sort of level this stuff out. There it is, it fits. I think that'll work. Now it's just to wire the thing up. Well, we have to paint this thing and then we'll wire stuff up. While we're waiting for the paint to dry on this guy, come over here and I have got a bunch of little wire connectors here. These I got from a place called Cycle Terminal. This is the set I'm using here, the part number. I'll put a link in the description as well. They also come with these guys here that are a little waterproof sort of grommet there. Open this stuff up and we'll take a look at the bike. My plan is to basically wire this in exactly like if it were a stock one, basically. So if you wanna, you can buy a stock sort of auxiliary plug and everything for this. And they're kind of expensive if I recall correctly, or I'm just gonna make one. Because these things are only like, I'm spending a couple dollars here total to do this. It also comes with some pins, some terminals, wire terminals. So I believe it's this plug that I wanna end up using. Let's go take a look at the bike. So this is our auxiliary terminal plug wire connection on the stock bike, the stock wiring harness. And so this guy, this has got like a little plug on the end of it at the moment. And if you notice, it's the exact same wire connection that I have here. And so there's just, we'll probably just use this guy. So you just pull this guy off. And this guy has like little plugs in the end at the moment, or rubber plugs. This one does not, so I can stick those wires through here and wire everything up. And this is just our connection that we want here. And if we take a closer look at this guy, you'll see there's 2 wires on this one. The CB500X has 3 wires. This one only has 2. This is the F wiring harness and everything on this guy. And so you'll see the green is sort of a universal ground on this bike. And so our purple is our power coming in. That's just something to keep in mind. We'll need that information in a minute. All right, so when you're ordering stuff from Cycle Terminal, they are in sort of a la carte, all this stuff. So all these things are little individual parts that you can order. It turns out, my recommendation, if you're doing this exact same maneuver here, is you don't have to order this at all. You can just, they have this one on the bike, pop these rubber plugs out the end, and this is your wire connector right here. You can just use this guy, so you don't even need to order any connectors at all. You just need to order some of the terminals, these pin terminals, and you need the male ones specifically. So there's a male, I got both because I wasn't sure. Here's the female ones here. So quick sidebar here, this is how they go together, the male and the female. You can see how the male inserts into the female, and that's how they get their name. And then you would also want to order these little wire seals that waterproof this whole connector. And that's it, just those 2 things cost you like less than $1. All right, so here are the wires that come with the little electrical socket. I'm going to use these, except on the end, this other end, I'm going to clip these guys off, and then we'll wire that part in to our little connector here. Go ahead and strip these guys. All right, so here's our little wire connector terminal, and you'll see on this thing that there are 2 open spots at the bottom here. This sort of longer and skinnier thing, this grabs the insulation on the wire. So this red plasticky stuff that goes in there. And then the other spot grabs the actual bare wire. The way I like to do this, I jam this thing in here, and then I use on this one wire crimpers. And basically you can see there's a pokey thing, a little thing that points out there, and then it's got a groove opposing it. I use that, you take the pokey thing, I put it on the back side. So the side that's flat back here, I stick that back there, and then the front side is where the groove goes. So you'll see this like that. And then you can kind of, I like to say, stab it in the back, squish everything right where you want it to go. A nice tight squeeze, and then we end up with that, where that's nice and pinched together. And now we still need to pinch together the little part on the insulation sort of thing. I kind of like to get it started around there. And then come in with my little pinchy back stabby thing. And then I end up with this right like that. And there's one. Now we gotta do the other guy here. All right, so now we've got the second one done. And now I want to actually go ahead and wrap these 2 wires together with some electrical tape. I could have, you could use like all sorts of other things. They make sleeves specifically. These are sort of plastic sleeves for stuff for wires to go in, and braided ones and everything. I'm just going to use the more traditional electrical tape and wrap this thing up just because it's cheap, and I don't have any of the other stuff at the moment. So here, but I've got some shrink wrap that I'm going to pull up over the end here and shrink everything down so that'll be nice and neat on that end. We'll do the same on this end too. All right, now, so of course I've made a mistake. These little rubber guys here, the little rubber boots, grommets, these guys should go on before we crimp on the terminals. I did not do that. So now I'm just I'm having to slide the little rubber boots on over the terminals, which is a pain, but doable. I'm trying to save this thing. All right, now they're both on there. So the next step is to sort of figure out which order, because one of these is going to be ground, one of them is going to be positive, and so we need to figure out on the bike by taking this guy over there, figuring out how this lines up with the other one, and we know which one is ground and which one is power on the other one. So let's go take a look at that. Here's our connection here, and if I install this guy on here, so that means our ground is on this side here. All right, and so when you're putting these guys in here too, you'll notice that we've got the back side of this terminal here, which is nice and flat, and the front side has all the little gizmos and ridges and pointy stuff on it. And that pointy side on this particular connector, this guy should go in like that with the pointy side up towards these round parts here. And mine, because I'm not using, this is sort of an unprofessional job here, I'm having to, the way these things are crimped, I'm having to sort of do a little bit of manipulation here and then straighten this out, sort of narrow it down a little bit so that it will fit inside its little tunnel here. Because you want it to look a little bit more like that, a little bit neater, so I don't have stuff sticking out so far. So that should work, and now I should be able to stick this guy in here. And you should be able to hear it click when it gets in place. There, now it's in there real good. So now we just have to get these little rubber guys in there, and I'm gonna use some soap water. Try and get in there and lubricate that stuff. Use my little screwdriver to try and jam it in as well. That worked pretty good actually. All right, so that one is in. You can see there's just a little bit sticking out, and both of those ridges are inside the tunnel. And do the same on this guy. And this water will dry out eventually, and I'm not too worried about it wreaking havoc on my stuff here. You could use some like dielectric grease or something on here as well, probably without any issues. There we are. Now they're both are in there nicely. Now I'm gonna bring my little shrink wrap up and over. Push that in, and then we'll do the same on this end here. All right, so here's our complete auxiliary wire connector here for CB500 for a Honda. So I'll put a link to all this stuff in the description in case you're interested in doing this stuff yourself, just knowing where to find these little wire connectors, because these are not easy to find, these things. So, all right, so this is our bracket all done. Still got the little brass stuff on there. I'm gonna stick this guy in. Go stick it on the bike. All right, so now we can come over here. We can plug this guy in. It should click when we got it plugged in. All right, so that is done. Now I'm gonna go ahead and run this part up through the front here, through a couple of these little things. On my bike here, I've got this little sort of, there's like a little ring, a little metal ring there where a bunch of other wires run through. I'm gonna run this through there as well. My socket, and on the back of my socket there is, I can see there's a positive and a negative. So this one over here is supposed to be negative. That's how it's marked. And you can see the positive symbol on this one. So make sure I connect those correctly according to how I wired this. So the red one is how I wired it, is positive, and the black one is negative. So we'll go ahead and attach those guys. There we are, and now I'm going to put this onto the bike. All right, and then we'll go ahead and torque these bolts down to 20 foot-pounds, which is what I need for this particular bike. All right, that's it, man. We should be good to go. We can test it out and see if it actually powers something up. But before we do that, and the reason I went to all the trouble, install that on there as well. So this is the ram mount I'm using. It attaches to where the stock mirror attaches on the handlebars. And I'm combining this with another ram accessory that will hold my GPS unit that I have off my car, which is a Garmin 50 of some sort. And here's the little ram mount itself. And this is the attachment point that goes onto the mirror mount. And these two things get mated together via some screws that come with this ram mount. And they very nicely include some nylock nuts. It comes with a bunch of screws, and I was wondering why there's so many screws, but there are 3 different lengths. So we'll figure out which one we need, which length works for us. electrical. That goes on there. A little screw goes through there.
So a nice design feature here is that on the GPS holder, the nuts have a molded spot there that they fit just perfectly into. So there's not actually a need for a wrench to hold these nuts. They just fit in there and that holds them, and you can just screw the little screw right in. And after that, it's just a matter of screwing everything together and we're good to go. And I ended up using the medium length screw on mine,
because the medium one goes all the way through that nut, but it does not come up through the surface here where it might hit the back of my GPS thing. So, all right, so over on my bike, here's a little cigarette lighter, and then you will see on mine, like I have the bar end mirrors, you know, this guy over here. So I don't have any mirrors attached to where they would normally go right here. If you did, you could easily unscrew the mirror, slide this little mount in underneath that, screw your mirror back in and tighten everything down. I've got just this little bolt here. All right, so this is what attaches here. We've got our little bolt. Stick this through here. I should be able to attach it onto here. Tighten this guy down. Snug again. And then it is pretty much attached on there. And it's just a matter of adjusting this guy wherever we want this to be. Not sure where I want it yet at this point, but probably somewhere in here. Go ahead and tighten that down. And that is our ram mount mounted. All right, so I've got a little Garmin 50 thing here. You'll see on the back side of this guy, that right there is where it plugs in. You also see on the back side of this guy, there's that little rectangle right there. That lines up perfectly with the plug on the back side of this. Goes in like so. Plug this wire through the back side of this guy. And so if we turn the bike on, look at that. There's a little blue LED in there. Isn't that fun? And we plug this guy in. We got power there. And we should get power up on the Garmin there. I think the Garmin thinks it's out, it's nighttime or something, because it's not very bright. But yeah, that's it, man. And then you can go to work. Go wherever I want now. It's like a life, it's a complete journey. I can go somewhere I don't know and then find my way back. All right, then I got all this wire here for the GPS thing. That's all this excess stuff. I want to get this thing under control. So I'm gonna try and wind this thing up and then we'll zip tie it. Got my little zip tie. There's that, that's my setup for that. Now we also need to go back. All right, so where this wire, we just plugged in all that stuff, we need to stick this back inside this headlights here. There we go. Just sort of jam everything in there, and that's pretty much it.
So I went out and took this thing for a ride, and it didn't take long before suddenly the GPS lost power. And it did this because the little plug that goes in the cigarette lighter kept jiggling out with the vibrations from the bike. And so I would jam it back in, and then it would jiggle back out again. And this happened several times, so I pulled over to make sure there wasn't something obviously wrong here when I plugged this thing in. And no, it was plugged in correctly, but it just kept jiggling out just because of the way the bike is and everything. Bikes vibrate, man. So I ended up turning around, going back home and seeing if I could find a solution for this. My immediate thought was just some zip ties.
And my solution was this little rubber bandy type thing that is made for holding together electrical cords, so it's adjustable. It's kind of like this rubber zip tie kind of thing, but I can run this underneath the cigarette lighter and up and over the wire connection here and just sort of sandwich this thing down together, and this worked great. It never popped out. I drove around for like an hour more and this worked awesome. Specifically, it's these guys here. And see, they're designed to hold together little electrical cords. Organization, man.
And then once I had that on there, man, it was beautiful cruising after that.